right, hello everybody. Welcome to this month's live stream. Got a lot to talk about today, especially with that teaser trailer for Godzilla Singular Point. I must say that the reason why I haven't done a Godzilla vlogs on it is because I figured I could just do it in this chat or in this show right here, and nothing is proving me otherwise. Hopefully I'm coming in okay. Let me know if I am. Hello, Justin. Hello, Junebug. Hello, JHL. I love that logo, by the way. The Godzilla Singular Point logo, where Godzilla is in white lines against the red background. I really like that logo. I think that logo looks really cool. Looks absolutely cool. Alrighty. I was awake when that hit. Yeah, I was awake when that got hit. The Godzilla Singular Point little teaser trailer, and it was a typical teaser trailer. I can say, or I'm sorry, it was a typical Japanese teaser trailer, I should say. In that there's no dialogue and it's nothing but music. Nothing but music, and with a bunch of visuals being flashed at you. If you guys remember the first Shin Godzilla teaser trailer, I don't know, maybe it wasn't the first one, it might have been the second one, did the same damn thing. So cool to see. There's definitely a pattern to Japanese movie trailers where they're very simple and to the point, and this one was absolutely no different. Been a crazy month. October was absolutely insane. And once again, I brought up my Fireball whiskey, and I will tell you something. If I can get that fucker open, there we go. I'm probably gonna drink this all tonight. Okay. Yeah, it has been a month, and November is not looking like it's been any better. It's going to be any better. My God, what a terrible, terrible year 2020 has been. This might go down as the worst year in history, in my book anyways. I'm looking like I'm out of focus. I need to fix that. Let me fix that. Configure a video. Excuse me, sir. I need the pop-up window. Thank you, sir. Let me fix myself. I look like I'm in focus right now. Hopefully that'll be okay, and hopefully I will stay in focus. If not, I'm going to keep that window open to control my focus. Something I've noticed with this webcam, as much as I like this webcam, is it really doesn't... Its autofocus is absolutely garbage. Yeah, so super excited about all of that. Not excited for 2020, and it looks like 2021 is not going to be any different, and it's all going to suck. And I am not looking forward to it. To get some A&P news out of the way, we were going to shoot a Thanksgiving special tomorrow. That got canceled. And that literally got canceled not too long ago. And yeah, not very happy about that. Hoping I can do that before I go home, because I didn't do anything really special for Halloween this year. I mean, I did the live stream, but, you know, a special video. And, I mean, I did a podcast on The Gorgon, which is a good movie. I really highly recommend it for you Hammer horror fans out there. Which, if you're not a Hammer horror fan, we cannot be friends. I am sorry. I am just terribly sorry about that. But that's how the cookie crumbles, I guess. And so I said, well, I might as well do something for Thanksgiving. And what I wanted to do is a Fat Man Little Boy episode with the Thanksgiving flavored sodas that are so famous, because there's a place around here that sells them still, and I wanted to buy them, and I wanted to do a big Thanksgiving-esque episode But who knows? Maybe this could be an opening, and I could do it with all the A&P partners that we have, so on and so forth. And yeah, a lot of things. A lot of short films are coming up too. We're going to be shooting a short film in January. We're shooting a music video in December, and then we're shooting another one in January. And there's going to be some other stuff coming up too, so on and so forth. And hopefully everything comes out okay. So Justin Tang writes, if you see the early Showa trailers from 1954 to 1964, they have lots of narration, whereas it's absent from Frankenstein versus Baragon onwards. Yeah, that's fine. I don't really see why that's necessarily important. It just sort of changed with the style of trailers. If you look at the modern Japanese trailers, they tend to do exactly what Godzilla Singular Point has done. In light of recent events, not even Jack Daniels sounds good tonight, at least for me. No, Jack Daniels... Yeah, I don't know if this is going to get me through the night or not. I don't know. This stream might actually be a little bit shorter than most of my streams. Normally I have them go on for about 2 hours just to sort of talk to all of you and so on and so forth, but... Ugh, man. It's been a hell of a week. Anyways. Based on your Adam Noyce Pilled Thanksgiving special... The Based and the Adam Noyce Pilled Thanksgiving special. Yes, that is exactly what I want to do. Shay Smither, hey, we're actually getting some chat. This is looking great. Shay Smithers writes, I saw recently The Curse of Frankenstein is going to be released on Blu-ray soon. Yeah, I am super excited about that. I'm glad the Hammer horror movies are starting to get some love. I know that the Curse of Frankenstein had not the best of quality DVD out there, and I'm glad that it's getting a Blu-ray release. Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed, though, was the one that I was waiting for the most, and I'm glad that that's getting a Blu-ray. I saw that was getting a Blu-ray release. That might have been canceled because of, how fucking COVID has... This year has been terrible, but I think I saw it might have been Shout Factory said that they were going to be releasing Frankenstein Must Be Destroyed on Blu-ray, and I was super excited about that. Super excited about that. Glad that those movies are starting to get a little bit more love. I mean everyone knows the first couple, but I really love Frankenstein Created Woman. I didn't think I would love that movie, judging by its ridiculous premise, but Frankenstein Created Woman is absolutely fantastic. I just like the Hammer Frankenstein movies in general. They're just really good. Oh, speaking of that, if you listen to my podcast on The Gorgon, which I still think is the most underrated Hammer horror movie out there. It is an excellent movie, and if you haven't listened to that podcast, I recommend you do listen to it. It's the most recent upload at ANP. I mentioned in that both Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee went on to play, not only Dracula and Frankenstein, of course, but they would play Sherlock Holmes throughout their careers. And I gotta say, I recently watched... He is still the best Van Helsing. I'm not gonna deny that at all, Junebug. I'm not gonna lie. I watched Terence Fisher's adaptation of The Hound of the Baskervilles, which not a big Sherlock Holmes fan myself. But when I heard that it was Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee was in it, and a bunch of these Hammer actors were in it, I kind of had to check it out, and I'm glad that I did. I'm really glad that I did. Thought it was a very fun movie. It was up on YouTube, I believe. I believe I watched it on YouTube for free. At least it was for a little bit, and that's how I got to see it. One hell of an opening, I'll tell you that. Definitely not the book. They definitely added horror to it, and if you are a Hammer horror fan, you will recognize some sets from Dracula, left over from Dracula, and you'll recognize a couple of music stings that is recycled from Dracula that they used within the movie. So, interesting notes there. Do check it out. It's definitely the most horror-based of adaptations of that story, and definitely probably my favorite. Definitely, it certainly wasn't very accurate to the book, but probably my favorite adaptation. It was just fun. Of course, Christopher Lee does great, and Peter Cushing, as always. But yeah, Peter Cushing is definitely the best Van Helsing. I wish he played him more. In fact, I would say Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee are the only two saving graces from the modern day Dracula movies. You know, you have Dracula 1972 AD, I think that's what it was called. That one is at least fun. I've got to say that. I at least like Dracula 1972 AD because, you know, at least has, like, the spirit of being a Dracula movie where it does have sort of these gothic themes in it and so on and so forth and all that jazz. But then you get to the next one, or I think it's called The Satanic Rites of Dracula. Let me look it up. Hammer Dracula series. Still better than that crap that the BBC recently put out, but yeah, The Satanic Rites of Dracula, which was released in 1973. That movie is just a piece of crap. It's just a piece of crap. Literally, Peter Cushing is about the only thing that really saves that movie. I can't even say Dracula, Christopher Lee, because it's quite clear that Christopher Lee's just checked the fuck out, and it's really funny to watch because of that. It's a terrible movie. I'm a fan of the show Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch, but that's about it as far as me being a Sherlock Holmes fan. Well, then you should probably watch the Dracula miniseries because those people wrote the Dracula miniseries. And I'll go on to say this right now, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again. That miniseries was a piece of fucking shit. And SJW Wet Dream is exactly what that is. Does not fit the tone of the book at all. You know, the book Dracula whatsoever. Doesn't even attempt to necessarily follow it. Which isn't necessarily a problem, because you look at Hammer's Dracula, and that certainly didn't really follow the book very much. I mean, it kept the basic outline and specific events the same, but that's about it, really. They definitely changed a lot, and for the better, in my humble opinion. In terms of screen adaptations, I think the horror of Dracula is my personal favorite of the on-screen versions of Dracula. I would say probably Nosferatu is second, so on and so forth, which is an interesting thing. Oh, by the way, David Callett. Everyone knows how much I love David Callett. David Callett did a fantastic audio commentary on one of the recent Blu-ray releases of Nosferatu, the original silent classic directed by F.W. Murnau. And it is absolutely fascinating to listen to. A typical David Callett style where you can listen to him basically read a phone book. And he is very entertaining. If you guys can somehow get a hold of that audio commentary, I highly recommend you listen to it. I learned a lot. Can't say that I was bored throughout that audio commentary. That's for damn sure. Yeah, the later seasons were really disappointing. I guess so. I never watched Sherlock. In fact, I didn't even know that they were making that Dracula miniseries until after I watched it, because I was excited for that Dracula miniseries. I was sitting down and I was loving how it looked. I loved how the trailer looked. I was loving the guy who was playing Dracula within that miniseries. He looked great. And my anger towards that, I remember throwing stuff at my screen, especially by the last episode. I was just so pissed off at how SJW that show was being, and its piss poor attempts at being funny. And I'm like, that doesn't fit your horror. That, you know, the Dracula is supposed to be sort of creepy and atmospheric and horror based. And I'm like, it's not. They tried to make things funny where they shouldn't have been, and the fact that Van Helsing in that series is a woman isn't necessarily a problem. As long as you make them a good character, and they don't. just absolutely fucking abysmal, that miniseries. Absolutely abysmal. I'm a fan of the one with Gary Oldman too, Shay. I actually like that movie. I always feel like a pervert after watching it. But yeah, I think it is a... Hello. Come on, focus. I think it is a fun movie as well. And not a fun movie, a good movie, I should say. Because fun movie kind of has a stigma to it that I don't necessarily want conveyed. 1 second, let me really get this focused, because this is driving me fucking crazy. There we go. Okay. But yeah, that's to be clear, the Francis Ford Coppola one, directed one. I always thought that was good. I love the artistic style of that, very Japanese, very kabuki, which is very odd, a very odd decision, but I'm glad they went through with it, though. It's like they didn't half-ass it. They went through with it, and that's partially why I really like it. I'm excited to hear Callett's commentaries on the H-Man and Battle in Outer Space. Me too, Justin. I'm actually glad the H-Man is getting an audio commentary. I was really let down by the fact that they, because Ed Gaczetski and David Callen and Steve Reifel did an audio commentary for Battle in Outer Space and Mothra, and both audio commentaries are pretty damn good. I listen to them frequently, as like background noises, almost as podcasts. But they didn't do one with the H-Man, and the reason they gave, apparently, was because they didn't have much to say about the movie. And I'm sitting there like, oh, come on, you could talk about Shinichi Sekizawa. No, he didn't work on that. It was Takashi Kimura. You could talk about Takashi Kimura. That could be something that you could really focus on with that particular film, because, it was one of his movies. You could talk about just sort of like the mutant human series in general that Ishiro Honda made, or even Ishiro Honda's dribbles into horror with movies such as that, and so on and so forth. And having said, I recently rewatched The H-Man, and I really enjoy that movie. I think it is a genuinely not a good movie. I should say that, because it is flawed. It does have its issues, but I sound really pompous for saying that, and I apologize, because I'm really not meaning to be. If I made the H-Man, I probably would have made it no better, probably even worse. But it's a good movie, but it's an okay movie, and there's a lot of things in it that I genuinely like. I like Kenji Sahara and Akihiko Harada's chemistry as they bounce off of each other. I genuinely liked that. I love the score by Masaru Sato. There's another thing you can get into, is Masaru Sato's impact on the tokusatsu genre, because he scored several tokusatsu movies, all in which are pretty damn good. The only one that's kind of subpar, in my humble opinion, is Godzilla Raids Again, and that was his very first music score, so you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. It's things like that are very interesting to talk about, and I can't wait to hear it. Also, judging by the teaser trailers that that company has, those Blu-ray restorations have been leaking. Gorgeous restorations. Absolutely gorgeous, and I can't wait to check them out. Super excited. Interesting to note that the American version is about 10 minutes shorter than the Japanese cut. The Japanese cut is 87 minutes long, which again is a short movie, but the American cut is 79 minutes long. So Shay, Shay, speaking of that, absolutely. I thought that, the Gary Oldman is a very good looking movie. I mean, just the opening had me hooked. If the music wasn't enough, it's the visuals had me hooked. They tried to make it look kind of like a puppet show, and I'm like, that's really interesting. It is a gorgeous looking movie. I really do like that. Thoughts on the Seven Samurai and Godzilla 66 years later? Seven Samurai is a goddamn masterpiece. I'm not the biggest fan of Akira Kurosawa. I think he's a bit overrated. But man, is Seven Samurai a fucking masterpiece. That movie, you can't deny to me how fucking good Seven Samurai is. And I don't think anybody ever will. It's just such a good movie. And I'm happy with my Criterion Collection Blu-ray for Seven Samurai. I don't really think anything else needs to be done with the movie. I mean, that's just it was so wonderfully preserved in that. But a wonderful fucking movie. Really influenced one of my favorite directors, Sam Peckinpah. I mean, Sam Peckinpah really started putting slow motion into his movies, or became obsessed with different frame rates and stuff like that because of Seven Samurai. And I like playing with frame rates as well, so I can't really, say otherwise with that. Let's see. Hey, Godzilla Kiru. Nice of you to join me here. I usually have a guest on these. I decided it hasn't just been me for a while, so I said I would just do this one on my own this November to see where things are going. As for Godzilla 66 years later, well, what can I say? He's the fucking king of the monsters, and he still is. I mean, I think Jun Fukuda put it best when Jun Fukuda said, Godzilla's popularity is quite astounding. I agree with him completely. Who would have guessed that this man in a rubber lizard suit would have become the pop culture icon that he became? And I don't know, I'm reading something. Give me 1 second. But yeah. Oh, by the way, Stuart Galbraith IV, Patrick Galvin, and Steve Reifel at that Kaiju Con thing that kind of replaced G-Fest did a great panel on Jun Fukuda. Did a great panel on that, and it was definitely fascinating to listen to. But there was something that they said in that genuinely made me scratch my fucking head. And when they were talking about Jun Fukuda, they marvel at how good, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster and Son of Godzilla are, which I agree with them. I think they are great movies, definitely massive tonal shifts, both visually, energetic-wise, and story-wise from the other Godzilla movies made thus far, and several Godzilla movies made later. And that's because they brought up what I was saying long before that. They were saying that by that point, those two movies were kind of the B movies of the kaiju tokusatsu flicks being made at Toho. Made with a different special effects crew, different director, different writer, and so on and so forth, while Shiro Honda got the more A-grade pictures with the international casts and so on and so forth. But they kind of breezed over the 70s era, and a lot of that was because they talked about Godzilla vs. Megalon a lot within the audio commentary that they were pimping out within that one. But that being said, they said something that really left me scratching my head. And that was, they thought Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, the original one, 1974, when they saw the images of Mechagodzilla, they heard about the premise, they thought it was a big letdown. And I couldn't help but scratch my head. They called it a tepid movie. And I'm like, how? I thought the directing within that film was extremely energetic, with some creative handheld camera work and so on and so forth. And they had to be very careful with the cinematography and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, they lionized Godzilla vs. Gigan as being an interesting children's movie with no children in it, which I felt very, very accurate to that movie. But they seem to think Godzilla vs. Gigan is a better movie than Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, which is absolutely fine. They can have that opinion, but I strongly disagree with them. I think Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, part of what makes it so fun is because of how energetic the directing is, especially if you look at that movie compared to Godzilla vs. Megalon. which they also brought something up that I think Godzilla vs. Megalon was largely improvised, and I have to agree with them on, considering how rushed the production was in the movie. But I really thought they missed the mark on Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I'm like, how can you not? How can you be let down with this movie? It has space apes. It's got an alien invasion. All right, it's got spy shit in it. It's got several shootouts and action scenes in it. Plus, you have two badass scenes with Godzilla. You got a whole new monster. Anguirus is in it. How can you be let down with that movie? I don't understand where you can be let down with a movie that insane, that apeshit, no pun intended, apeshit insane. That's what I find very interesting about that, and I didn't understand it. I just didn't understand it. Their criticism of the Heisei series, of course, in that one, they're typical Heisei bashers. They sort of bashed the visual style of the Heisei series and how it felt like there was no directorial style to them. That I actually agree with. I think everything after Godzilla versus Mothra, 1992, the Heisei series all kind of looks very similar, but I'll say this now, and I'll say it again. The Heisei series is my favorite era out of all the Godzilla movies, or out of all the big Godzilla eras, but it definitely is the weakest visually. I won't deny that. I won't deny that, but of course they took every opportunity they could to bash the Heisei series because they are at the forefront for bashing the 90s Godzilla films. And they are part of the reason why the clusterfuck known as Toho Kingdom is as poisonous as it is. Yumi Shirakawa and Yoshio Tsuchiya do very well in that movie too. I assume you're referring to the H-Man. I thought Yoshio Tsuchiya did okay in it. He just kind of had a background role in it. As for her, I thought she was just a damsel in distress. She's one of my criticisms of the movie. Where if I were to remake it, I would have made her a more proactive character instead of her just getting trucked around in the sewers all night. Yeah, Justin, I actually agree with you. It's not my favorite. No, it's not my favorite of the Fukuda Godzilla films. I really love Son of Godzilla. Like, that movie just genuinely has a great place in my heart. But it's definitely my second favorite. I love Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, the original one. I think it's such a fun movie and so energetic. You cannot deny to me that movie is just full of life and full of energy. Even, there's only two monster scenes, really, if you look at it, like big monster scenes in it. And that doesn't stop the movie from moving. The characters aren't as fun as I would say in Godzilla versus the sea monster, or Godzilla versus, or Son of Godzilla, I should say, where the characters, I think, in those movies are just top notch and they're just a blast. But they didn't need to be, because there was such a story kind of going on within Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla that wasn't necessarily there with Godzilla versus Sea Monster and Son of Godzilla. So on and so forth. So I agree with you, Justin. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. Yeah, Yumi Shirakawa, she was also the love interest in Rodan. She kind of has, that's a criticism I have of Rodan as well. She's very much the damsel in distress in that movie too. But she has less to do in Rodan than she does in the H-Man as well. So that's you kind of debating on which one is that. I've recently watched Rodan as well, which I wanted to get into a little bit later because I wanted to talk about, merits of the alternate US cuts of these movies, especially these older films. But really, the attack sequence on the US cut of the original Rodan is just phenomenal. It is just phenomenal. Like, I have a hard time watching the Japanese version just because of how much I prefer the attack sequence on the US, the King Brothers cut of Rodan. Like, it's quite interesting, So I guess let's get into the meat of this. I guess I'm gonna talk about Godzilla Singular Point, and I messaged my friend Lucas, who's also a Godzilla fan, been on the show several times, and he all I said to him was Jaguar's back, which of course fits that style of anime, you know. And I'm not a fan of anime. Um, I'm not a fan whatsoever, and I've gone into reasons why in the past and in other live streams. But Jet Jaguar would work in an anime because anime is always so over the top and so crazy that of course he would work in something like this. And the art style of this anime is clearly very um, over the top in many ways, where everything's very vibrant, very colorful, which is in sharp contrast to the anime Godzilla films, which were very monocolored, very, their color palette was very muted. Well, if you look at this, you get bright reds and so on and so forth, and everything like that. So of course Jet Jaguar is going to work. How he fits into the plot, what the plot is, and everything like that, I have no idea what's going to happen. I am really looking forward to it, just because, one, because it's Godzilla, and I'm going to watch everything Godzilla related, but two, it's definitely not going to be the anime Godzilla trilogy. And I'm not saying that as a middle finger to the Godzilla anime trilogy, because again, I don't hate it as much as a lot of people hate it, but I don't like it either. But this is definitely looks like a new take on what's going on, and a lot of that I give the Japanese props for. Say what you will, whether or not it's a good thing or not. Yeah, Gridman. So I've heard. I have not seen Gridman, so I wouldn't know. But say what you will, I like how the Japanese have been taking risks with their Godzillas and trying to tell somewhat new stories with it. Like, you can't deny that the anime Godzilla trilogy had a new thing to say. It had brought a whole new world to Godzilla, which is my biggest compliment with it. Shin Godzilla certainly was taking a new direction with Godzilla while trying to retain some of the nostalgia that we have for it and so on and so forth, and I really liked it and everything. This definitely looks like it has a new take on it, even the art style. I don't know. It looks typical anime, but yet it looks slightly retro, and I'm okay with that. I like how they're really going 2D on a lot of things. But the big thing that you've got to point out are the monster designs. And clearly what they're going for is they're going very dinosaurian with these kaiju designs, which is fine. Absolutely fine. I won't lie, I'm not a fan of the Rodan design, but it will probably work in context of the anime with what they're doing. I mean, on the surface, I don't like the Shin Godzilla design whatsoever, but it works extremely well within the movie. So that's probably what's going to happen here. In fact, Rodan was the only monster that I really had a hard time... Oh, no, I take that back. Titanosaurus. We're pretty sure that's Titanosaurus. Ugh. I mean, of course, if you're going to make him an aquatic dinosaur, you would make him that kind of dinosaur, That fits. But they are clearly going very dinosaurian with it, which makes me wonder what Godzilla is going to look like, because the promo art is different than what the trailer kind of showed with his face and what's kind of above me. He does have a Joker smile. I find that interesting, but whatever. That's fine. It looks great. It looks like it's going to be fun in the very least. So I am kind of looking forward to it. It wouldn't surprise me if this anime turns out to be kind of like Godzilla Final Wars in a lot of ways, where it's just balls to the wall crazy and things are always happening. It's not going to be like the Godzilla anime trilogy, where it's very slow, very meandering, and the action is going to be very slow. No, in this one, it looks like it's going to be absolutely apeshit insane. Love the Gabara design. The Gabara design looks fantastic and an interesting take. I wonder how they're going to weave him in there. Are they going to keep his sort of dreamlike origins the same, or are they going to just completely reinvent it and make him another giant monster? Who knows? Ebera's in it. I'm not sure if I saw Amanda in it or not, but I could be completely wrong. Completely wrong with that. Yeah, the original one, yeah, the original design of Titanosaurus, Justin, definitely does kind of look like a seahorse. But yeah, no, because Titanosaurus is an aquatic dinosaur, I know that I understand their mentality, the artist's mentality of this particular design, and I'm okay with it. Definitely not what I would do. How you guys have seen the poster for my Godzilla vs. Titanosaurus, the book. But it will probably work out great in this show. It probably will look out great. I'm certainly looking forward to it. I think it will, in the very least, be an extremely entertaining show, where things are just kind of badass and crazy, and that's okay. That's absolutely okay. As long as the show knows what it wants to be and follows through with it, I'm sure I will like it as well. You see, that's the key. Anguirus looks even more like an ankylosaurus than he ever seen before. Yeah. And on the surface, you look at that design, and I'm kind of like, ugh, that's really over the top. But of course it is. It's an anime. Anime, of course, heightens everything visually, to the point that it kind of drives me crazy in a lot of shows. But so of course it would kind of look. He would kind of look like that. Well, if I saw that design live action, I probably would have more of a problem with it. But because it's not live action, it's in an animated series, I'm okay with it. I really am. Even Rodan, you just heard my spiel about Rodan. But even that, I was finding myself saying, okay, I'm on board. I'm okay with this. Now, something that I really wanted, because everyone's talking about the designs and everything like that. I'm going to take another swig. We're talking about the designs and everything like that for the anime Godzilla, Godzilla Singular Point, what the Singular Point mean. Everyone's sort of guessing that what it basically is talking about is Godzilla is the catalyst for everything that's happening. I don't know. They'll definitely make it known why it's called Singular Point. I am curious about it. That's for damn sure. But something that people haven't really been talking about is the music for this teaser trailer. I love it. In fact, that was one of the things that really drove me into checking out the being excited for it. Is I love the music for it. The teaser trailer, of course, as I said before, does the same thing that a lot of the teaser trailers did for Shin Godzilla, where it was just a clip of music from the movie with visuals within a movie. No dialogue, no anything to really explain what's going on, just to sort of get you hyped visually for the film. Singular Point did very much so the same thing. And I was hooked. Have not heard anything that this composer has written before. I literally had not heard of anything that this composer had written before until I looked him up. Yeah, Ken Sawada, I think his name is. Ken Sawada. He did the music for the live action adaptation of Grave of the Fireflies, which I like. I mean, I prefer the animated movie for sure. But I really enjoyed the live-action version. Definitely a different take on Grave of the Fireflies. And he did the music for that, and the music was great. Have not heard anything else. He's apparently a big game composer and an anime. He's done several animes. So he is at least familiar with the genre. And I really liked that music. It was very simple. It wasn't anything crazy. I loved the horns that began on it. It was very reminiscent of Ifukube. And to me, you can't deny that, because Ifukube was the one that really kind of brought home the fact that we're going to use these brass instruments and just blare them into the microphone for kaiju themes and giant monster stuff, and making things look and sound bigger. I mean, he was the one that really revolutionized that. You can't convince me otherwise. But or I should say perfected that, not necessarily revolutionized that. But I loved how it opens with that, and it felt very Ifukube-esque, as you see what looks like Godzilla powering up his atomic breath. Now, I noted that they kept the purple color from Shin Godzilla. Actually, I'm not sure if that is Godzilla. It's presented as if it is Godzilla. It could be something else, but it's presented as it is Godzilla. As if it is Godzilla, I should say. So interesting that they kept Hideaki Anno's purple atomic breath. Interesting that they did with that. But anyways, I was hooked as soon as I heard that music. And of course, they would open with that music to really catch your attention, and then it gets into the faster strings, the sort of ostinato-esque music afterwards. Very reminiscent of Ifukube, without sounding like Ifukube, and I like that. All right. Anguirus looks even more like an Ankylosaurus than before. One thing, Shay writes, I would really love to see seeing moments of Godzilla and Anguirus' friendship. These moments in Godzilla vs. Gigan I felt were some of the best in that movie. Absolutely, and I completely agree with you. Are they friends, though? We just don't have any information with this anime. What's going on. So we're going to have to, of course, watch it and wait for more trailers and of course, wait for things to sort of progress from there. Yes, Justin, I completely agree with you. I'm not glancing over you, Shay, I promise. The thing which has me the most curious is the red mist we see around Godzilla and the flock of juvenile rodents. Yeah, that looks really interesting. Really interesting. I kind of like that stuff, And again, this is one reason why I'm liking the Reiwa era. Even if I'm not necessarily loving the movies that have been coming out of this, with the exception of Shin Godzilla, I'm loving that they're taking risks over in Japan. They're like, nah, let's see if we can reinvent this shit. Let's see if we can really sit down and try something new with these giant monsters, unlike that bullshit that's being made over here. And so I can, in the very least, look at the Reiwa series so far and be like, this has been so far the era of experimentation. And I always love experimentation, and respect it. Even if you're working with a character and it fails and it falls flat on its head, I can in very least respect it for them trying something new. And so far, the Reiwa series has not let me down in terms of that. Yeah, Shin Godzilla was a masterpiece. Shin Godzilla is the only one that I really fell in love with. But I can say this, kind of going back to how I've been looking at the Reiwa series so far, the Reiwa era as a whole, is it's definitely not the Millennium series, where the Millennium series, hell, you had Godzilla vs. Megaguirus, then you had GMK, and then you had Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. And Megaguirus and Mechagodzilla are essentially the same fucking film. They really are. Replace Megaguirus with Mechagodzilla, it's essentially the same fucking film. And though, Mechagodzilla is a better movie than Megaguirus for sure, by leaps and bounds, I would even argue. The fact that it's the same film really kind of proves, and I would even argue Tokyo SOS is kind of the same movie. Again, really shows you the lack of creativity that the Millennium series really had. That being said, GMK is an amazing film. Godzilla vs. Final Wars was fucking balls to the wall, insane crazy. Even Godzilla 2000, I think, was a wonderful love letter to Showa Godzilla. But you can see the lack of creativity there, the lack of them willing to take risks. GMK was the only one that kind of took risks, and it paid off, which is why I'm surprised they didn't do that again. Why they went with Masaki Tezuka again for Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, there's a lot of Toho politics behind that I don't really want to get into, but it kind of does baffle me why Shogo Tomiyama, who took over for Tomiyuki Tanaka, went the way he did. But the Reiwa series, in the very least, is being like, nah, let's really play around. Let's play around with these established tropes and so on and so forth, and let's see what we can do. And I respect the fuck out of that. And I'm glad that they're doing that. I'm glad they're not being stagnated. And things aren't becoming very by the book numbers like we got with a lot of the Millennium movies. Let's see what else chat has been saying while I went on my little rant. Oh, wow, that was attractive as fuck, wasn't it? I'm feeling all warm in my tummy. I might get drunk by the end of this. I'm giving everyone a fair warning. I have not been having a good time lately. My God. I've not been having a good time. I just want 2020 to be over. Let's see. I think Bono's spirit is influencing the VFX artists at Toho. What does that mean? What does that mean, Justin? Are you talking about Yoshimitsu Banno? Because there's a sad story. If you guys want to go more into Yoshimitsu Banno, I did a Godzilla vlogs on him, and he is kind of a tragic story. I feel really bad for him. I think he could have been great. Yoshimitsu Banno is one of the greatest what-ifs of Godzilla history. What if he really got his way? Because Godzilla vs. Hedorah was successful in Japan, but it was also pretty successful over in the United States. So to me, if Tomoyuki Tanaka hadn't been in the mental state that he was in, and Yoshimitsu Banno had actually been given the chance that he deserved, and that Tomoyuki Tanaka had promised him, it would have been very interesting to see where 70s era Godzilla would have gone. We definitely wouldn't have gotten the more traditional movie, which of Godzilla vs. Gigan. You know, maybe would have gotten something like Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, maybe. But, you know, Godzilla vs. Megalon would have certainly been different. Interesting to see. One of the greatest what-ifs of Godzilla history, if Yoshimitsu Banno sort of took over the reins from Ishiro Honda and Jun Fukuda and became the new director. You know, the new vision for Godzilla. Would have been very, very interesting, because he had his whole ideas. And yeah, I know he kind of threw Takashi Kimura's script out the window and changed it to, you know, what it was. And a lot of people said maybe Takashi Kimura's script was better. Yoshimitsu Banno clearly didn't think so. Or clearly thought, hey, I can at least try something new here. And I will give Yoshimitsu Banno credit. Godzilla vs. Hedorah was definitely different than anything else Godzilla related before that, and I would argue even after. I mean, Godzilla vs. Hedorah, one of the most experimental Godzilla movies out there, and partially why I love it so much. I mean, it's just a fun little piece, especially if you know the behind-the-scenes stuff and how, like, they didn't have money for a second crew, so the special effects crew became the main crew, and so on and so forth, and how the budget kept getting slashed, and the time kept getting slashed, which is partially why the animated sequences were added in there as a bit of filler, where there were supposed to be dialogue scenes, but they didn't have the money to shoot said dialogue scenes, and so on and so forth. So it definitely makes me appreciate the movie, and maybe that is a flaw of me, because if I know the making of the movie, it tends to affect my judgment, my final judgment of the movie, and it can even help me enjoy the movie in areas where I really shouldn't. And maybe that's partially my problem with Godzilla vs. Hedorah, because I really do love that movie. I think it's a great film. I really like it. Even the fucking music, and again, I've done a podcast on this as well. The music score, Richiro Manabe, new to the Godzilla franchise, definitely created a different score than you would have heard with Masaru Sato or especially Akira Ifukube. Very different, by the way. And of course, a lot of that had to go with the fact that they had no money. They didn't have the money to really hire an orchestra, so Richiro Manabe went with his synths and so on and so forth. And definitely interesting. Definitely interesting to really look at. And I think that ultimately made Godzilla vs. Hedorah one of the reasons why I like it. It's just so different from everything else, not just in the Showa era, but also Godzilla. It's just so different. And yeah, I think his Richiro Manabe's theme to Godzilla, you know, those blaring trumpets and so on and so forth, definitely embodies superhero Godzilla more than anything else. So definitely something that that it really makes me stand out with it. I think his theme is a little bit better handled and fits a little bit more in, let's say, Godzilla vs. Megalon, which was specifically made just for kids and so on and so forth. And so it's kind of goofy and kind of fits with that. But it works. I personally think it works. I know a lot of people criticize it as saying that it doesn't fit Godzilla at all. I think it fits superhero Godzilla perfectly, personally. Shay Smithers writes, I do love Godzilla vs. Hedorah. I do understand why a lot of other fans say they don't, though. Me too. Absolutely. Yeah, I really, really do understand that on the whole. But anyways, going back to Godzilla Singular Point. Yeah, so I am excited. I will be checking it out. I am excited. I am looking forward to that greatly. But what's this I hear that, and maybe some of you can sort of clarify this in the comments, but I heard rumors that Godzilla vs. Kong is getting released straight to HBO Max. Is this true? If it is true, that says two big things with Warner Brothers mentality, or specific Warner Brothers mentality, or whatever for the Godzilla. One is it says they have no faith in the movie because of how bad. Not in terms of the movie being good or not. I'm talking in means of box office, because of how bad Godzilla King of the Monsters bombed at the box office. They're afraid to release Godzilla vs. Kong. The other thing is it says is they're really afraid of the competition, because there will be a lot of competition coming out. Because right now it seems like they're just sitting on this movie and afraid to release it, because there's going to be a shit ton of other movies being released all of a sudden once the quarantine shit and the social distancing shit starts being lifted as we go into 2021. And they're really afraid that Godzilla versus Kong just isn't going to have a chance. And quite frankly, I agree that Godzilla vs. Kong isn't going to have a chance against some of these Marvel movies that are planning on being released in theaters around, once everything starts getting lifted. So if I've been saying for a while that Godzilla vs. Kong should be released very similarly to The Invisible Man. The Invisible Man remake, when it got released, pay $20, get a few friends over, you get to watch it in your own home. That was a great deal, in my opinion. And that movie, of course, cost significantly less money than Godzilla vs. Kong would have made, but I'm guessing that that's the way how it should really go, and so on and so forth. And I've been wanting to get out of movie theaters for a while anyways. I'm not a fan of movie theaters. I kind of take the Mike Stoklasa from Red Letter Media's opinion that I hate going to movie theaters because everyone's gross, everyone's disgusting, everyone's loud, and I just want to watch a movie. And so I have a big TV. I have a surround sound system in this room. I have a huge TV. I basically have a theater experience here, and a lot of people do as well. They have the benefits of having a sort of a home theater setup, just like I do. You can have this basically the same experience of watching most movies in your own home as you do in a theater. Now, of course, I'm not saying that's completely replicating it. Seeing Godzilla 2014 in theaters and having people screaming, yeah! When Godzilla uses his atomic breath for the first time, that was awesome. And you wouldn't have had that, sitting in your own theater, by yourself in your own home, certainly. But I was definitely not a fan of movie theaters that much anymore. Definitely not. Like, I went to see a re-release of Star Trek The Motion Picture on the 40th anniversary of that in theaters, which was awesome, by the way. But I had to listen to these fuckers sitting behind me the entire time being like, boring, move on, the entire movie. This was happening the entire fucking movie. I'm like, fuck, I should have just watched the movie by myself in my room with all the lights off one night and the surround sound blaring. Would have gotten the same exact experience. So, That's why I don't like movie theaters. That's why I've stopped liking movie theaters. Plus, I like the fact that these streaming services, especially now, they're starving for material. They're constantly, and a lot of these are independent movies that they're picking up for good and for bad, and I really like that. But anyways, that's the rumor that I heard. I am not. I do not quote me as that being fact, everyone, that it's being released on HBO Max. But I heard that that's what was happening. And if that's the case, I am personally okay with that. Because quite frankly, I agree with the executives, that the money people, that it doesn't stand a chance against the powerhouse that is Disney and what they're going to be doing as soon as these social distancing laws, these stupid social distancing laws, are raised. They're not going to stand a chance against Marvel. They're just not. Marvel is now the monopoly of movie theaters, of movies. So, there is my my little rant on that. Justin writes, I love Hedora himself, but have mixed feelings on his movie as a whole. That is the genuine consensus I've heard about Godzilla vs. Hedora. And while, of course, I love the movie, I really understand why people don't. Hedora is also one of the few kaijus that I would absolutely love to see rendered in CGI, where they really play around with the idea of him being a pile of sludge, which is what he was supposed to be. And don't get me wrong, I love the suit design. I really do for Hedora. I love the designs and his evolution and so on and so forth that they do with Hedora. And they do a great job with the limitations that, they had working with, at the time. I think it looked great. I love the sludge effect. I love the suit design itself. It looks coherent, but at the same time it doesn't because of the amount of layers that are sort of dripping on top of each other. That suit must have reeked, by the way. Because the way how they make it, rubber stinks. I don't care what people say, rubber stinks. That suit must have just fucking reeked. Oh, man. I feel bad for Ken Shapiro Satsuma. I feel bad for the suit actor in that. And, yeah. That's that. Would love to see Hedora something. There was a fan film, Godzilla Battle Royale, which you can't watch on YouTube anymore, unfortunately. But Godzilla Battle Royale actually played with an idea that I kind of liked, that you could probably do with Hedora, which was he kind of has the idea of Hedora is that it's like bajillions of these microscopic organisms coming together and making this thing that were mutated by, of course, our pollution in the water. And they play around with this idea that, like, there are other versions of it and so on and so forth. And while Godzilla Battle Royale, the fan film, is just that. It's a fan film. It's just balls to the wall crazy, and it's a fun fan film. Billy DeBall I can't say it enough. I think he did a wonderful job with it. But I love this idea that, like, pieces of Hedora come off and so on and so forth, and they become, like, their own, like, creatures and so on and so forth. So you have sort of, like, these zombie kind of things happening, and I really liked that idea. And I would love to see that played around with. I would love to see that sort of idea, that version of Hedora played around with. Which, if I ever do anything with my Mothra saga, if I ever get that off the ground, which, granted, I don't think I will. It was just an idea. I had some of the basic outlines written down, but I don't think I'll ever go into anything more about it. But Hedora was in that, and that was one of the things that I really wanted to play up in that. A mutated kaiju. Not from radiation, but from our own pollution. Definitely an interesting idea. And I love that concept, too. There's another thing that sort of stems from Yoshimitsu Banno trying new things, is that he really wanted to take Godzilla into a different direction. Was instead of focusing on radiation, like so many of the Godzilla movies did, it focuses on a different topic, which was pollution. A very relevant topic for the time. This sort of new topic, while radiation and nuclear bombs sort of went by the wayside by the 1970s because of several treaties and so on and so forth, and the slowing down of testing and so on and so forth, pollution was still a big fucking deal for Japan. It sort of became the new topic. And Yoshimitsu Banno leapt on that. It was near and dear to his heart, like Ishiro Honda was with nukes. and or being anti-nuke, and yeah, definitely something interesting. Yeah, rubber stinks. Yeah, I would not have liked to have been on those sets, Justin. Yeah, burning rubber in particular is like the worst smell ever. Just the fucking worst smell ever. Um, just, I mean, you just look at Hedorah's suit and you're like, oh, good God. Oh my God. Looks great though. Looks really great, and I love those red eyes that Yoshimitsu Banno said fashioned after vaginas. I gotta love that. I just have got to love that, man. Oh, that's crazy. That's fucking crazy. I gotta really love him for all of that shit. Ugh. There, I'm putting some music in my ear just to sort of keep me going, I guess. See, I'm a bit of a predicament here. Um, I have a podcast I want to record, and I have written, but I'm bored. I'm really bored with just doing podcasts and stuff. And it wouldn't surprise me if you guys see me take a break for a while, um, to really just work on short films and stuff like that, because I'm just so bored. And like, I'm not even joking. I'm kind of running out of things to talk about with Godzilla on the Godzilla vlogs. Um, that I find interesting to me, and so I don't know, man. I'm kind of in a predicament. 2020 has been, yeah, here, shoot fly, don't bother me. Has been by far the worst year creatively of my life. The absolute worst year. It has just been terrible, and I know it hasn't just been terrible for me. It's been terrible for like the whole fucking country. But yeah, it's definitely something. Definitely something. All right. Well, that being said, I think I've tackled that 30-second teaser for whatever the fuck it's called, Godzilla Singular Point enough. So I think I'm gonna move on to what I have down next, which is the U.S. versus original Japanese versions and merits of one versus the other. And how fitting that we're doing this in DKU TV is actually playing an AIP special. Um, showing nothing but AIP restorations and so on and so forth of certain films. And as I said earlier, and I've done a podcast on the differences between the US and Japanese versions of Rodan, it really bothers me that these alternate cuts aren't getting not the love that they deserve, because sometimes they don't deserve love. Look at, Gigantus the Fire Monster. But they're not being released. Why isn't Toho letting that happen? Because they clearly... Here's Toho's stance. Toho's stance clearly is that their movies, their versions of the movies, are the versions of the movies that they want released. Which is odd, because they are also releasing the Champion Film Festival cuts of these movies. So it's very odd. It's just very odd to me that these movies, because these were the versions of the movies that we grew up on. At least I grew up on, not the Japanese versions. And while yes, I tend to agree with the mentality that the Japanese versions tend to be better, the American versions still have their fucking merits. One is they're dubbed, so younger Godzilla fans can sit down and watch them. All right, because when you're 5 years old, you can't read subtitles. I don't care what anyone says. but also there's some interesting edits in them that I just find very interesting. I mean, you saw listened to the 2-part podcast I did on the different multiple versions of Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster. That's what really got me into editing. I'm a big editor now. Like, that's a lot of what I do. That's 90% of what I do is I mix and edit and for companies and so on and so forth. And that is partially what got me into that kind of shit, is watching the multiple different versions of these movies. And they're not getting restored. And I love these fan restorations, but they will never be a true restoration. You know what I'm saying? And I really wish they would get a full-on restoration. And an official release too. They should get it. They deserve that. I think they deserve as much over here in the West. And so on and so forth. But they're also just interesting. And one reason why I bring this up is because recently Dawn of the Dead got a 4K restoration. And if you know Dawn of the Dead and its history, you know that there are 3 official cuts of that movie. There is the theatrical cut, which is George Romero's personal cut. There is the extended rough cut, which has less goblin music, but has more gore in it, and so on and so forth. And then there is the European Argento cut, which cuts out a lot of the comedy in replace of action, but keeps all the gore. And all 3 of those got a 4K restoration. And all 3 are now available on 4K and Blu-ray, and they look fantastic. I can't wait for my box set to come in. But the question that I have is, they were willing to release all the different versions of that. Why can't they do that with Godzilla? And I think, Justin, you are actually touching on the right thing. I think it's also because of the licensing right of some of the U.S. distributors. For example, Godzilla vs. The Thing was distributed by AIP, but that studio no longer exists, which is an interesting point. What's very interesting is that the audio tracks of those movies are in the public domain because of that, but they're not the video. That's what happened with a lot of the Gamera movies. You listen to a lot of the Gamera AIP tracks that were released by AIP TV. Those are in the public domain. The audio tracks are in the public domain, but the video is not. So it's very, very interesting. Though now that might be a little bit different because of course, what Arrow has done, and they've restored a lot of that. They've restored a lot of those, but AIP, Justin, also got bought by a different company when it never went under. AIP did not go under. It just got sold off because Arkoff was working on his own by then, and he was getting old and he was getting tired, and he sold off the company. And it got sold off to another company. It might have been Warner Brothers. No, it was MGM. I think it was MGM. One second. I'm going to look this up. I love AIP. I'm obsessed with AIP. American International Pictures is amazing. National Pictures. I love AIP. There's a wonderful documentary on YouTube that AMC did about AIP. And it's a wonderful documentary. A fucking hysterical film. Yeah, the Arkoff formula. Like, they have something called the Arkoff formula. I'm going to read this to you guys right now. Samuel Z. Arkoff, one of my inspirations. The Arkoff formula, ARKOFF formula, for producing a successful low-budget movie years later during the 1980s talk show appearance. His ideas for a movie included action, exciting, entertaining drama, revolution, novel or controversial themes and ideas, killing, a lot of killing and violence, oratory, notable dialogue and speeches, fantasy, acted out fantasies common to the audience, and fornication, sex appeal for young adults. The Arkoff mentality. In fact, I fully admit, that the logo that A&P has, the saying that, A&P now takes as their own, I took from American International Pictures. Make them fast, make them cheap, and don't sweat the small stuff. That's American International Pictures. And I really love that, and I completely agree with their mentality and so on and so forth. But yeah, let's see who bought them. Yeah, okay, so they got merged with Filmways Incorporated, which was a television and film production company. Okay. It was sold to Filmways. Okay. Now, who bought Filmways? Oh, they made Ice Station Zebra. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. I love Ice Station Zebra. It's a good movie. They produced the Heavily Built Hillbillies, too. This is fun. I'm sorry. I'm going down a bit of a rabbit hole right now. I apologize. Let's see. They are currently owned by Warner Brothers and Turner Entertainment Company subsidiary. Okay, so that's interesting. So basically, Ted Turner owns all of these. Joy. Yeah, so basically Universal, Warner Brothers, and Ted Turner basically own all of these movies now. So Warner Brothers already had to give the okay for Criterion to release all of their Godzilla flicks, and then Toho had to do the same. The problem is Toho. That is blatantly the problem here, and why these versions don't get restored. Toho is such a Nazi when it comes to their image of Godzilla. And on the audio commentary thing that, the G-Fest replacement podcast did, Steve Rifle went into why. And that's because they have to literally approve everything that goes on these discs, not just the films. All I can say is props to Katakawa. Props to Katakawa and with Gamera, because they basically said, sure, release them and do what you want. And it's a great series as a result. The Arrow release of Gamera, the Showa and Heisei Gamera films and so on and so forth, all of the Gamera films is a wonderful, wonderful set. Wonderful, wonderful set. And I wish Toho... Excuse me. I wish just Toho would get it through their fucking thick skulls of how much more money they could be making if they just laxed off a little bit on their copyright. That's just fucking crazy to me. But anyways, God bless American International Pictures. Gotta love them. Gotta love them. Hi, John S. Weekly. I'm glad you're in the house. Not much to talk about right now. But here's a list of movies that I almost prefer the US version over the Japanese version. Godzilla vs. The Thing. I almost prefer the US version over the Japanese version because of the barrage sequence. The barrage sequence that's in the American version that's not in the Japanese version is just so wonderfully done. Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, I prefer the structure, and of course I've said this many times before, I prefer the structure of the US version by far. And then the last one that I prefer the US version over the Japanese version is definitely Godzilla 2000. I much prefer Michael Schlesinger's edits to that film than the Japanese version. The Japanese version is definitely feels more like a rough cut. Yeah, but the attack sequence on Rodan, I will say this full-heartedly. Going back to Rodan, the original Rodan, the Japanese version of Rodan is vastly superior to the American cut in many ways. I mean, they are basically the same movie, but the Japanese. The American version has the dub, or has that narrator over the thing that's so needless that a lot of these older, early on, those sort of early on kaiju flicks have, that just make no sense to me whatsoever. And that's partially why I really like putting that one down. You know, stock music replacing of Ifukube's music, you know, that's fine. I mean, because there is an argument that I've heard by many people that Ifukube sounds very Japanese. Tomoyuki Tanaka would even argue that, and that's one reason why Tomoyuki Tanaka didn't really want Ifukube back to score the Heisei Godzilla films. I'll agree to disagree with him there, but yeah, there is an argument to be made there. But the attack sequence on Rodan, the U.S. version, is just so amazing, and a lot of that comes from the decision to introducing the second Rodan earlier in the movie than him just randomly appearing during the attack sequence. And on top of that, they replaced all the sound effects for that sequence with their own, while keeping Rodan's roar the same, and it's just a cacophony of sound. And that's what I love about it. Well, the Japanese version is a lot quieter during the attack sequence. And, of course, they have Ifukube's music underneath it to try to add some of that, you know, help some of that sound design. But the American version went all out. Even the gun sound effects are much louder. Much louder in the U.S. cut. And that's partially why I prefer it. And the cuts are quicker, too. More special effects shots, some unused special effects shots too. Since it's quite clear that the King brothers, who released Gorgo in Britain, made and released Gorgo, which is an impressive looking movie, not impressive story wise, but definitely an impressive looking movie. It's quite clear that what Toho gave them to work with was not the original version of the movie. Because there are these special effect shots that they use within their cut of Rodan that are not in the original Japanese version, it's quite clear that what Toho gave the King brothers to work with was a rough cut of the movie, where they gave them basically a lot of extra footage that was then cut from the Japanese version and tightened to be the more straightforward movie that we know. And, you know, that says a lot. And because they had some of that extra footage, they were able to use it in the attack sequence, shorten it, make it, yeah. And so it definitely helped the movie and so on and so forth. Shay Smithers. Shay, you right. I don't get why Toho hasn't allowed Rodan War of the Gargantuas to be released on Blu-ray here in the West yet. Is it a rights issue? I don't know. War of the Gargantuas hasn't been released on Blu-ray over here, but War of the Gargantuas has been released online. You can watch it on the Criterion channel. You can watch it on Stars. So it is kind of over here. Even though I think the print that they use is shit. It is garbage. I hate the print. It's not as bad as the Japanese version's print on the Classic Media DVD, where if you watch the U.S. version, the one by Henry G. Saperstein and UPA, that version, if you watch it on the Classic Media DVD, looks fine. But if you watch it on the Japanese version, on that same disc, it looks like utter garbage, like a blue tint over it, and it's super dark. You can't see what the fuck is going on. The aspect ratio is wrong. It's a terrible, terrible print. The Criterion release of War of the Gargantuas on their streaming channel and on Stars has like a green tint over the entire thing, and it looks terrible. It's very similar to the brown tinting on the previously released version of King Kong vs. Godzilla, where that version of the film had like this weird brownish tint over it where the darks are really dark. You can actually see it. It is this version of the film that is on the Criterion Blu-ray as the special feature. It is that version that's on it, and you'll see what I talk about when you pull up a screenshot of it. It's super brown and super dark, and the Stars release is very similar, but with the green tint instead of instead of brown. So you kind of pick your poison. And that's so crazy, considering the fact that Toho's restoration of War of the Gargantuas looks great. Looks phenomenal. You know, it's a little flat. The colors are a little flat. But Jesus Christ, it looks great. It's by far the best print of the movie I've seen. By far. By far. And you're right, Shay. I just don't quite understand why they haven't released it on Blu-ray or a decent print. Why do they release the prints that they do? I just don't understand. Not really sure. Not really sure. Ugh. Now that's an interesting one, though. War of the Gargantuas is an interesting one to talk about the differences between the U.S. version versus that of the Japanese version. You know, Russ Tamblin's in more of the Japanese version, or I mean in the U.S. version, you know, during those scenes where he's investigating the shipwreck and so on and so forth and finding the bits of Gyra DNA and so on and so forth. Or him talking to the shipwreck survivor. You know, he's not in the Japanese sequences. He is in the US releases of the film, which you can't really see the US version of the movie anymore because Toho won't let it get released. They won't let it get released. And so we have to deal with the classic media DVD or a VHS copy of that version of the movie. But anyways. Justin Tang, you ask, was there ever a 235-1 version of the beach attack scene filmed for Godzilla vs. The Thing? Heard it was originally intended for the Japanese cut as well, but it was declined, and it was declined because Toho felt it was uncomfortable for them to see U.S. Ships bombarding the Japanese coastline again, so close after World War II, despite it being 20 years, whatever. So they replaced it. Okay, so to answer you, Justin, yes, there is. It was released on DVD a while ago, a long time ago, not in letterbox, but in a full screen format with widescreen. So basically, if you were to watch it on a widescreen TV, you would have black bars on the top, bottom, right, and left of the screen. And someone actually recently did a marvelous HD reconstruction of Godzilla vs. The Thing where they completely restored particularly that sequence and reinserted it into the movie. And if you get a hold of it, I highly recommend it. So you can see it in its original aspect ratio as it was intended to be seen. Also noted, he took care of the little slice marks that you see at the bottom of the screen that are quite prevalent in the Criterion Collection discs. So that is also there as well. He took care of those, so props off to the guy who did that restoration. Vastly appreciate it. And then, Justin, you immediately write, while we're at it, we still need a re-release of the Media Blasters Tokyo Shock titles, the Mysterians, Atragon, Frankenstein vs. Baragon, Dogora, Latitude Zero, and a bunch of others. Yes, I completely agree. I think they should be released on something kind of similar to the Mill Creek packs, where it was like we'd have 3 of them on a disc. And we won't get the special features, but just to have them, because I've seen the Toho Blu-rays of them. The Toho Blu-rays are great. I have the Toho Blu-ray of Atragon, and I think that looks fantastic. I made a post on Geeks for Geeks for that said thing, and I thought it looked fantastic. Press F to pay respect to all the U.S. personnel who died fighting Godzilla. Press F to pay respect, please. Press F. That's such a meme. I love that so much. Yes, John S. Weekly, you have blessed everyone with your presence. Good night. Gotta go. Ta-ta for now. Goodbye, my friend. Live long and prosper. Oh, I'll send you that thing, by the way, John. You did the music for the documentary. I'll send you that shortly. It came out fantastic. Thank you. I'm listening to Electro Swing in my ear. I was going to listen to the Godzilla vs. Megalon soundtrack to sort of get in the mood of Godzilla, but then I said, nah. I'm so down. I need something slightly more uplifting than that to listen to. A gigantic Tyrannosaur is attacking our boys. Oh boy. The English is strong in Japanese movies. Which, by the way, I would like to say this. The Russian sequences in Godzilla 1985, well, the Return of Godzilla in general, are awful. That is some terrible sounding Russian. In fact, it doesn't even sound Russian. He sounds Ukrainian. Pretty bad. Pretty bad and pretty bland. I will say that. So it's not just Japanese. I'm sorry, it's not just English. It is also Russian as well. Any foreign language, basically, you see in these movies, it is pretty bad. Pretty bad. I gotta hand it, though, to these people who are doing all these fan restorations of these versions of the movies. They're doing a hell of a job. One hell of a job. I'm actually quite jealous of them. Like, they've really done their research. They've really done their job well. They've edited it as best as they could. They've restored it. They've even recolor corrected a lot of them. For example, the Red Menace restoration of Ghidra the Three-Headed Monster, which is still my favorite looking print of the movie ever, is gorgeous. He recolored the entire thing, and he gave it a little film grain to make it look a little more like it was actually shot on film, and not that faded look and slightly out of focus look that we get because of their denoise effect that that Toho put on the releases. And it's gorgeous looking. It's absolutely gorgeous looking. But I got to give them props, all of them, because it's not just Red Menace. Red Menace, in my opinion, made some of the best ones, but not completely. In fact, somebody gave me an HD restoration of the American version of Rodan, which he went through a whole list of stuff on that. And I was impressed, to put it mildly. I was impressed by how much detail that they were going in, and how the process of them restoring, in many cases, this really grainy 480p footage into 1920 by 1080p, upscaling it to HD without it looking like shit, because a lot of times it can. And I gotta give them props. Total fucking props. Because, and I can't even get angry, because it's quite clear that we're not getting these versions of the movies on an official release. So this is what we've got. We've paid for our versions of the movies, and now we're going to make our own. So it's quite interesting. Quite interesting. Master Video Studios, you write, as a future National Guard artillery crewman, thank you very much, each time we do field practice, I'm going to think I'm bombarding a different kaiju. I don't blame you. Ugh, I don't blame you. It's fun. It's fun. It's fun. Ugh. Ugh. I don't know what else to say, ladies and gentlemen. What a crazy year. I cannot say that enough. Just an absolutely insane year. And not in a good way. Because in my opinion, you can have an insane year and have it be good. Where things just are happening all the time and you're accomplishing a lot of shit. No. 2020 has just been the worst. The fucking worst. And unlike a lot of my audience, I am not a social recluse. I like going out. I like going outside. I like hanging out with friends. And, yeah, COVID definitely put a shutdown to that, and I hate everything about it. Yeah, I definitely couldn't be playing this music. That's copyrighted as fuck. All right. Movies to watch around Thanksgiving. Wasn't 1920 also a really bad year? Yes, it was. Well, it wasn't really a bad year because the economy was doing great in the Roaring Twenties, but there was the Spanish flu. That's what it was, and that killed 1% of the entire world. So, how fitting. The rest of the decade was pretty good. So let's hope that the Roaring Twenties continues. However, I am worried about 2029 then. Because not only is that when the first book in the Godzilla saga takes place, that's also the year of the Great Wall Street crash. So let's hope that that doesn't happen. Let's just put that politely. Tsuburaya died in 1920. You mean he was born in 1920? Yeah. He certainly didn't die in 2020. Oh well. Movies to watch around Thanksgiving time. Might as well go on to that for a little bit. I like really watching kaiju movies around this time period, and I think it's because I believe El Rey, Robert Rodriguez's channel, would do a sort of Thanksgiving marathon of a bunch of classic Godzilla movies. And I think that's partially why I've sort of gotten into this mentality of I've got to watch as many giant monster movies as possible around Thanksgiving time. I think that's why. But I know one movie I always love watching around Thanksgiving time to sort of get into the mood of that is definitely Son of Godzilla. Son of Godzilla really is one of those movies that, one, it just makes you feel good, and two, it just sort of fits with the holiday spirit, I think. That kind of movie where things are kind of fun, things are okay, there's a family theme with it with Godzilla and his son. It really fits well with everything that goes on around the holidays. So I think you meant 1969, Justin, since that's when Tsuburaya died, but I think he died in 1969. It might have been 1970. I can't remember. I can't remember. I'm looking it up. Tsuburaya. 1969. No, he did. He died in 1970 at the age of 68. Well, Tsuburaya had a bunch of problems, health-wise anyways, because not only was he a chain smoker, which definitely didn't help. What do you mean the 1960s weren't that great? The 1960s were great. Everyone was high. It was okay. The Tsuburaya had a bunch of health problems anyways, which didn't help his problem. Not only did he have really bad diabetes, he had diabetes really bad. He was also a chain smoker and didn't do anything to try to help himself with that, and he died of cancer. It gave him cancer as a result. Though, you know, I don't know. Did he have lung cancer? I'm thinking it was lung cancer. Years. Oh no, he died of a heart attack. Oh well, that's not even. Never mind. But again, it was a lot of health stuff that went into that. Yeah, the commies did get cooked by napalm. Thank God. Fuck the commies, and I still say that. He worked for Toho Studios where he died of a heart attack. I know that he had cancer. He definitely was diabetic, but he died of a heart attack. And a lot of that was his own doing. Some of his life choices, I should say, which was sad. Also, you gotta admit, Tsuburaya was also exposed to a crap ton of really, really dangerous chemicals his entire life, making the stuff that he did. Um, a lot of stuff that would probably kill most people. So it's not surprising to me that he died when he did. The fact that Teruyushi Nakano is still kind of kicking around is astonishing to me, considering you look at some of his sets and stuff like that, like how he hasn't gotten cancer is beyond me, which is really funny because you see Teruyushi Nakano like on set with all these explosives around him with a cigarette sticking out of his mouth. It's what a different time. I kind of wish I lived then. I would have been living the life. Yeah, the 1970s. Heavy metal, man. Heavy metal. When do you guys consider is a good time to start listening to Christmas music? This is a good question that I'm going to propose to all of you listening, the few of you that are still listening, because I don't know. This year has been such shit. A&P partner Jennifer Pautke, she said she's already listening to Christmas music because this year has been such shit. Yeah, I know about Penn Central. Has been such shit that she's already starting to listening to Christmas music to get into the spirit. And I am very tempted to do the same damn thing. The same damn thing. So when would you consider? Because normally, yeah, Master Videos, I agree with you. You say the day after Thanksgiving is the acceptable time to start listening to Christmas music, but I don't know. This year has been such shit. I might have to start listening to it now just to try to get out of it. I love Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving for a few reasons. One, it's because I get to go hunting. I get to go deer hunting. And two, I love Thanksgiving because, god damn, I love eating. I love eating so much. Doesn't show on me at all. I'm as thin as a pencil. But eating is fun. Eating is definitely fun. I don't know. I literally don't have much else to say, guys. I'm really sorry. I talked about a lot of stuff, but not much is really happening. I mean, all I can really say... Well, I mean, stuff is happening, I should say. But it's A&P side stuff, not so much Giant Monster Kaiju podcast stuff. I know that the week before Pearl Harbor, I am releasing a podcast on what is my favorite version or film adaptation or portrayal of Yamamoto, Admiral Yamamoto. To get prepared for Pearl Harbor Day. And I'm doing that for a very specific reason, and I'm looking for it. I'm really happy with that podcast because that really got to tap into something that I love talking about that a lot of you don't like listening to. Is why most of you know me because of my love of giant monster movies, which is fine. That is definitely by far my largest audience out there. But I love history. I eat, drink, live history. That's partially why on a lot of my podcasts I don't really talk about the movies themselves that much anymore and talk more about the behind the scenes stuff of it, because that is all history related. All that stuff is history related, which is what I really like talking about. And that particular podcast, I really got to talk about some of the build-up, why Pearl Harbor happened, and so on and so forth. Of course, I couldn't go into the detail that I would love to go into, because then the podcast would be like 12 hours long. But, I got to sort of scratch the surface on some of the history stuff. But another reason why I'm also afraid to do more things like that is because the history community is very picky. Because if you do say one thing that's slightly wrong, you're wrong. It's not like a movie where it's an opinion. These are events that happened. People were killed, people died, and so on and so forth. So while I try my damnedest to be as accurate as possible, and so on and so forth, when doing those sort of podcasts, I'm very, scared that I will fuck something up. And they never shy away from me saying I fucked up. But goodbye, Shay. Glad you could join while you did. I'm probably not going to be on for too much longer anyway, so you're probably not going to miss too much. So on and so forth. Glad you can join, Shay. Talk to you later. But I also am doing one as well called, let's see, what is it called? Let me just open my doc really quick, my podcast doc. Which, by the way, I've started to come to the realization that a lot of these podcasts, quote unquote, that I do aren't really podcasts. I should just call them lectures almost, because I have really detailed notes, but it's just me. And to me, a podcast is when you have, like, you know, different people on and so on and so forth, sort of more like the Joe Rogan Experience. Well, I'm very formal with those, so they're almost more like lectures than I would call them podcasts. So I'm thinking about rebranding them to be lectures, not podcasts. And even the format that I do now, where it's like I'm in the corner, I do a picture-in-picture kind of deal, and so on and so forth, is a little bit more formal than what you would say a normal podcast would be. I would treat these live streams that I'm doing like right now as far more podcasts than those, actually, to be, if I'm to be completely honest, anyways. Well, they're not going to build any new battleships, Master Video Productions, and I will tell you why they're not going to build any more battleships, because no one's building any more battleships. Battleships were outdated by the time of World War II, so so they're not going to build them. But yes, I agree with you. That's what they should be named if they were to build them. But yeah, but battleships by the time World War II broke out were outdated enough. So they're definitely not going to bring them back now, and it would be a complete waste of money. You don't want to... The key thing, and I learned from the Soviets, the key thing is you don't want to build one thing that's big, you know, and powerful. You want to build a lot of shit that's okay. You know, shit that you can produce on such a massive scale you just overwhelm the enemy. That's how you win. I mean, and the Germans never understood this. The Japanese kinda understood this a little bit with their planes, but I would argue that they also didn't really understand it, because the whole idea of the kamikaze is just dumb to me, anyways. What a waste of manpower. A waste of, not just manpower, but also machines in general. Because instead of using those machines to bomb them and then fly back to rearm and then go out again, possibly, you're just wasting an entire machine, and not just that, but a pilot. And, you know, a lot of that was part of the reason why not just, you know, the Japanese Air Force started failing so miserably, but also the Luftwaffe over in Germany as well. A lot of their pilots were just getting killed. They're good pilots. They're expert pilots. And being replaced with these trainees who had hardly any time to train at all. Let's see, Justin, you write, aircraft carriers and guided missile destroyers have pretty much made battleships obsolete. Yes, and people were really starting to understand that by the time World War II was starting to really break out, you know, before 1941. And there are even historians, Dan Carlin being one of them, that sort of states in this sort of morbid kind of way that the attack on Pearl Harbor did us a favor in some ways. And what I mean by that is these battleships were just useless. I mean, they were obsolete anyways. It sort of just cleared the way for us to build more aircraft carriers and so on and so forth. And that was definitely the key to especially winning some sort of war in the Pacific, because people do not understand just how fucking big the Pacific is. Your best bet would be using aircraft carriers anyways, you know. And Yeah, yeah. So it was definitely very very interesting. Master Video said, speaking of Axis war machines, I would love to see a modern retelling of the about the Bismarck. Me too. Me too. Even you know what? Maybe even a little bit more than the Bismarck. I would love to see a story about the Prince Eugen, the battleship, the Prince Eugen. That's a crazy fucking story. But yeah, I would love to see a modern telling of, or a modernized version of Sink the Bismarck, because I really love that movie, Sink the Bismarck. I think it's a very good movie. And the miniature work, the miniature ships and so on and so forth, outstanding. Some great special effects work in that movie too. The black and white film also helps, but yes, I would love to see a more historically accurate rendition of that, like down to a T. It would have to be historically accurate to a T, though. It can't really, you can't go SJW on it. It needs to be as accurate as possible, and so on and so forth. But yeah, I agree with you. It needs to be both British and German. The idea of the I-400 class submarines was a smart idea, though. Had they been in operation earlier than the IJN, Imperial Japanese Navy, could have pulled off attacking along the west coast. You're right in many ways. I would think... You see, I'll say it right now, and I kind of bring this up in that podcast that'll be going live towards the end of November, but Japan had lost the war already. Because, let's look at it. Japan was having a hard enough time dealing with the quagmire that was China. And so, by 1941, they now are planning on blitzkrieging the rest of Southeast Asia, basically, and expecting to get away with it, and go to war with not just Britain and Australia and all their powers, but the United States as well. Yamamoto was absolutely right. He was absolutely right when he said, all right, I bet you we could scurry around and do a lot of damage for 6 months to a year, but after that, we are going to lose. He was absolutely right. And of course he was right. And again, I go into that into the podcast more, so you guys will have to stay tuned for that. But I don't really want to necessarily repeat myself, but I've heard a lot of people theorize, why didn't Japan go after the Soviet Union? Why didn't Japan invade Russia? Because if Japan had invaded Russia, then a lot of those divisions that were brought over to attack the Germans, especially around the Battle of Stalingrad time, would have been stuck fighting the Japanese over in Asia. Well, here's the thing, and this is a movie I would love to be made. Tonkin Gall, I believe is what it was called. The Battle of Tonkin Gall. Let me type it up to be clear. Tulkin Gulf. No. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Not Tonkin. Japan. No, it's Japan versus Russia. World War II. Manchukuo. Come on. Come on, it was what kept General Zhukov alive. I've got to look this up. I apologize. It's literally what kept him from being purged. Yeah, the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. There we go. This battle, the Japanese thought they were going to waltz right over the Soviets and wound up getting their asses kicked. And what really made the Japanese get their asses kicked was how great of tank commanders the Soviets had, particularly Zhukov, who was very smart. well, not the smartest, but he was just good at what he did. And it was just the battle resulted in the defeat of the Japanese Sixth Army. They crushed the Japanese at this battle. And that is why the Japanese were so afraid to go after the Soviets at this time period. They were genuinely afraid. While they looked at America as being, and while this is kind of true, it's not completely true, a lot of the Japanese hierarchy, particularly in the army, looked at the United States as being subpar, as being too lax, extremely isolationist, because in many ways we were. However, a lot of that Japanese mentality was just flat out wrong. I mean, they just could not comprehend how industrial savvy we were as a nation, how we could just crush them, and we did. In fact, I personally think the war would have ended sooner if it wasn't for the fact that we agreed that we deal with Germany first. The Germany first doctrine, in which we'd agree to take down the Nazis before taking down the Japanese, and so on and so forth. But in many ways, they bombed our battleships, many of which would just be raised and would see action again. I mean, I think it was the Nevada that actually helped bombard the coastline during the invasion of D-Day. So even then, the Japanese didn't do very much. But it really sort of brought out the importance of aircraft carriers, which I think Yamamoto understood. I think Yamamoto understood that aircraft carriers were key to a lot of this. If anything, battleships by the time World War II broke out were nothing but a symbol at this point, kind of like a king in England. Like, he's a symbol, but doesn't really have any political power outside of being a king. And that's sort of like the battleship. The battleship was basically a giant hunk of metal by that point. And that's all it really was. It had big guns. But you see, the Japanese had overexerted themselves already by the time of 1941. That the moment that it became a war of attrition, just like the Germans, by the way, just fucking like the Germans, the moment the war became a war of attrition, the Japanese had lost. Because I can't emphasize enough that they were already having a hard enough time just dealing with the Chinese. But somehow they said they had to attack the rest of Europe. And I'll give you this. We did drive them into a corner. We drove the Japanese into a corner because we cut off their oil. We gave them something like 80% of their oil supply at that time. And without oil, their empire could not expand or even stay the same. And our ultimatum was get the fuck out of China. And they weren't about to do that. The Chinese were not, particularly the army, they were not about to do that. And so either they could attack Russia and grab some of their oil fields, which they were afraid to do because, again, the Battle of Khalkhin Gol. And they got their asses handed to them then. Or attack us, which they thought we were sort of bit of subpar stuff, which again was wrong. That was their mentality. It's not necessary. Just because that was their mentality, that doesn't make it necessarily the reality of the situation. In Master Videos, you bring up a very, very good point. I find it symbolic of Pearl Harbor today that the USS Missouri's main battery armament is raised to stand guard over the Arizona wreck. I find that is very fitting. Sorry, I saw the USS Missouri and I thought you said Mussolini for a second. No, the British took out a huge chunk of the Italian Navy with biplanes earlier, which inspired, and they did the same thing. The British developed a torpedo that didn't require to go underwater as far, and so they could hit a lot of these battleships that were in dock where they shouldn't have been able to hit them, and that really inspired the Japanese to take the decision that they did to actually go after Pearl Harbor, which you got to admit, the Japanese were pretty genius. I mean, you look at the technical aspects of the attack on Pearl Harbor, and it's a miracle that it went off the way it did. It was definitely a Hail Mary, and one of the riskiest moves I've ever seen them put into warfare. And they managed to pull it off a little bit. The only thing that I don't quite understand is why the fuck didn't they send in the second wave to go after the oil fields? Because if you look at the Battle of Pearl Harbor, sure, it was certainly a moral victory, a morale booster for the Japanese, for Imperial Japan, but it really didn't achieve very much other than getting us angry and into a war. That's about it. That's an idea I explore. Justin writes this. That's an idea I explore in my Atragon manga adaptation, that the Gatango is the last battleship to fight since the 4 Iowa-class vessels had been retired by 1963. That is an interesting idea. But anyways, I have a podcast actually coming out after that called Atragon 1963, a clever parable for World War II. And I'm quite looking forward to that. I'm probably going to record it tomorrow at some point. I'm going hiking tomorrow morning. I'm leaving here early in the morning, and I'm going hiking, so on and so forth. So I'm going to probably do it after that. Probably going to do it a little bit after that. But, yeah, that's something that I talk about. I mentioned in that podcast, I mentioned, the experiences of, like, Shinichi Sekizawa, Shirohanda, and so on and so forth. And I also mentioned the historical parallels that happened within Atragon that happened in actual World War II. It is a very clever parable, and you can't say that I'm overthinking it, because it's quite clear that's what the writers were looking to do. We're definitely looking to do. It'll be a good podcast. Yeah, but I'm probably going to record that sometime tomorrow. The Iowas were decommissioned after the first Persian Gulf War. I'm not sure about all that. I don't really know. I know more about tanks than I know about ships, admittedly. So, I don't really know. Well, anyways, everyone, I think I'm going to call it a night. It's getting 10 o'clock here. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Thought I would do this one alone. Just because I haven't done one just by myself. Usually I have an ANP partner on with me, but I thought I would, just do this one by myself, just to chat with you guys and see what happens. It was a good one. Glad I did this. Definitely glad that I did this. And again, I like doing these live streams on the first Saturday of every month, and so the next one of these sort of Q&A-esque live streams will be on Saturday, December 5th. Just in time for Pearl Harbor Day. So yeah, stay tuned. Stay tuned for all of that. And again, I just want to say ANP is making a crap ton of short films and music videos right now. We're in the process of doing that. We're in the process of making another short film called Campfire, in the process of doing 2 music videos, and other things as well. Excuse me. I say that right now. More Fat Man Little Boy episodes are also coming out. We'll retry more weird and random foods. Stay tuned for that. I don't know why you guys are arguing over this. I don't really care. He is right, though, Justin. I know that we used some battleships during the first Persian Gulf War. We did use them to bombard the coastlines. But I don't know if they were Iowa class. I don't know any of that shit. I don't really know any of that. I know more about tanks. I'm kind of more of a I guess you can call me a bit more of a standardized war person in terms of tanks, finding them fascinating than that. But anyways, I thank you all for doing that. If you haven't already, I suggest you join my let's see. If you haven't joined my new group, Godzilla and Kaiju Podcasts, please do so. That is a new group that we have starting to go where you can share your podcasts, or if you just want to listen to Godzilla podcasts, that's where they go. It's not just me, Justin. I know you've been sharing stuff there, and a few other people as well, and it's definitely given me some stuff to listen to, and I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to. So I'm very happy that that is there. Anyways, so thank you all very much. I'm glad you've all joined me. And in the end, this is Adam Noyce, and I will see you again a little later. Take it easy, everyone. Happy November. Happy Thanksgiving.